Just thinking back to a memory of 1996, my last year in the army, and it was whilst I was serving in Bosnia for NATO as implementation force, trying to separate the warring factions of the Bosnian Civil War. It was, I would say, around January time, probably towards the end of January. It might have been early February. What I do remember is it was a lot of snowfall this particular night that I'm talking about. My main job for the regiment, the Queen's Royal Hussars, was radio repair cell. There was two of us, and we had a short wheelbase Land Rover at our disposal, and the plan was, this was our main job. I mean, obviously we had other jobs, for example, in the ops room, finding communication between squadrons, bearing in mind that Bosnia is very undulating and a little bit like Wales, I would say, to look at countryside wise. So VHF radios were, to be honest, no good at all. So we had the task of setting up HF frequency comms, basically going out into the hills and erecting antennas to try and help the squadrons who were located in different places to communicate between themselves and headquarters. So that was sort of, you know, other jobs. I also offered my services to take basically rubbish to a landfill site, because I had my HGV licence at the time, which I basically did in my spare time for the cause, I suppose, if you like. It was just a helping hand. Not that you get thanked for it, to be honest with you, but anyway, besides the point. So I suppose I should have looked it up really, but I'm just trying to tell you this from my mind, what I remember. I was based along with HQ or command troop in a little village called Clutch, which basically took over an old transport depot and made that our base camp, and made the best we could with it, basically. The other squadrons were based at, I can't remember which was where, but you had Grad, Bos Petrovat, and I'll have to find out the other one, I can't remember now, it's on the tip of my tongue. But also you had the main HQ, which was a bit further afield, where I used to have to take equipment if it needs special attention, and I used to have to take it up there, myself and Trooper Blackman, at the time my comrade in arms, if you like. It was just us two, short wheel base Land Rover, roaming in between squadrons, helping them repair the communications basically, and help maintain communications between themselves. But anyway, this particular night we got called out to, it was getting on a bit actually, I think it was after tea. Tea's about 6 o'clock, bear in mind winter, so it's dark, and I think it might have been Bos Petrovat we got called out to. One of the Challenger tanks had traversed, and some of its communication cables got tangled and basically ripped out, so we called out to go and repair that. So anyway, off we went, myself and Troop Blackman. Bearing in mind this is the early days of implementation force, you know, you're talking weeks since the UN basically left with their tails between their legs. No disrespect to our fellas because they had their hands tied, but anyway, we went off and got the job done, if I remember rightly. It's just that I can't remember much about the details, but anyway, we got in there, repaired what we could. I think we had to order some other parts, but anyway, we did what we could to get them back up and running. It was when we were coming back, you're talking probably around about midnight, I would say, of that evening. We was on our way back down to Clutch, bearing in mind the roads are just snow covered. It was near blizzard weather, and I remember we were coming down this road, and our headlights picked up something in the near distance, like, and couldn't quite make it out at first. And as we drew closer, Blackie, my partner in crime, if you like, said there's armed troops, they're not ours. So he had no more to do and cocked his weapon ready to have a gunfight with these people. They were hostiles, all armed, I'd say at least 12, and they were basically walking towards us to the side of the road. We crept down. I told Blackie to calm down. To be honest with you, I think it was me that needed to calm down. I think Blackie was quite calm, but ready, if you like. I didn't fancy a gunfight in the middle of nowhere, and I suppose in a way I was praying that nothing kicked off. And as it happens, as we drew closer, we could see they're all armed with AK-47s from what I can remember. And I remember, I think it was probably the second or third guy down as we passed them, just gave us a wave. To be honest with you, I don't think they had the belly for any more sort of fighting. I think they'd had enough anyway through the previous few years, through the civil war there. So I suppose we can count ourselves lucky that particular instance. But yeah, I must admit I was touching cloth at the time. But I'll tell you what, I must admit, you know, Blackie was there, he was ready, and take my hat off to him. But you know, this is just one instance of what we had to go through in Bosnia in the early days of the implementation force. It was like Wild West country, to be fair. You didn't know what was going on. The factions were still being disarmed. Obviously these weren't. They still had weapons. So it was a bit worrying, not really knowing exactly what we were going into. So yeah, a bit hair-raising. I mean, there's an accumulation of situations like that, and that was just one that I sort of, it's come back to me that I can remember vaguely. Like I say, the locations, squadrons, I'll have to look up and perhaps do an updated video where it's not gone dark on me. But I remember going for my war pension a few years after leaving the army itself, and I remember a statement in when they investigate your service and everything, they sort of decide whether you was there or not, that sort of thing. And I'll never forget that one particular, I think it might have even been someone from my regiment, I can't remember, saying it was unlikely that I would have seen or dealt with this sort of thing. But what these people don't forget is that me and Blackie, a two-man section basically, in a short wheelbase Land Rover, in hostile country, and we had to go from squadron to squadron over a distance, and we also had to go into the hills to erect these antennas for the HF comms. So for them to say that it was unlikely gets my back up a little bit, because, and again, no disrespect to any of the squadrons, I mean, they did the patrols, they had their close shaves with I think mainly the Serbian factions, to be honest. But anyway, besides that, they weren't sort of, they were always in a, you know, a troop or a squadron in and around that location, whereas myself and Blackie had to travel from Clutch to wherever the squadrons were at whatever time. I don't think they liked us to go out after a certain time, but sometimes you've got to, depending on the emergency. So for someone to turn around and say, oh, it was unlikely, he saw this and did this and this, that and the other, really gets my back up, because like I say, me and Blackie, beckoning call out to the squadrons or wherever we had to go. We basically panned the whole area the regiment was in, and then obviously up to you know, brigade headquarters, sometimes probably once or twice a week. So, you know, we saw a fair bit of the land that we were occupying, and you know, for them to say this really does get my back up a little bit. Bearing in mind other duties we did out there were like patrols, out and about, just basically patrolling the area, and there's some grisly sights there as well, but obviously they think that I can't prove nothing, but actually I'm not one for taking photos and that, and I have got one, I think, because if I remember rightly, I couldn't believe what I'd seen, that anyone could do what they did. It's a photo from a distance, so it's not sort of gory detail, but you can see exactly what I saw in one particular moment. To be honest with you, I think it's probably the first I don't know, deceased person that I saw out there. Bearing in mind there was quite a few, as you can imagine. So that was a bit of a shocker for me, and I think it's something that stayed in my mind forever. But I'm going back for my war pension, and I'm getting like evidence that I've come across to prove that I saw what I saw. Anyway, that's enough ranting on about that, but just to highlight the fact that you know, you do these things for people to try and help the world, and you get these arseholes today calling you a racist or right wing, all that sort of shit. And at the end of the day, we went above and beyond duty as far as this nation's concerned. We served our Queen and country, but we helped a lot of other countries as well. So, you know, people should remember that. Anyway, thanks.